Hannah Murray on TRE in the afternoon.
Good afternoon. Joining us on the line now is Sarah Bennett-Nash. She spent 2 decades inside global finance, advising leaders at the world's largest banks. She's now on a mission to help millions of people build lasting wealth through meaningful work and internal alignment. Her book, More Money, More Life, is every woman's guide to breaking free from money troubles and funding your dreams. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me, Hannah. I'm really, really excited about speaking to you today on the launch of the book.
Oh, yeah. Brilliant. So exciting. Great timing. It's like we planned it. So tell me a bit about your background, first of all, and how and why you got into the world of finance.
Well, it was a story of love and romance and excitement. And I galloped across the globe with my then boyfriend from London to New York. And once I arrived in New York in my shiny new role, I discovered that I really didn't like it at all. And so I was on this quest to find a new role and actually really fell into banking. Like so many of us, I know we have similar stories, but in the US, when you settle somewhere, you need to get a visa, and as part of that process you need to be in a profession, and banking was one of those professions. And so I trained as a lawyer, and then it seemed like an easy pivot to move into banking. And so my first day that I started in banking, I just remember being on the 50th floor in Wall Street, just looking across the sun setting of the Statue of Liberty, just thinking, how on earth did the lass from Yorkshire get here? Just incredible. But yeah, that's really how I started, and then led on to 20 years in banking.
Amazing. And what happened kind of after that? What was the catalyst to writing this book and wanting to help other people, women particularly?
Yeah, it was a slow burn, if I'm honest. I'd had so many money wobbles of my own over a number of years. And actually, New York was probably the place where I had my first real money wobble. And I'd always been pretty good with money. You know, I'd left university reasonably debt-free. I worked, a number of jobs and worked bloody hard, actually, whilst I was doing my degree. And then when I was in New York, I personally had a bit of credit card debt, and the exchange rate swung on me. And then I was all of a sudden sort of panicking around this big debt that I'd accumulated on a UK credit card, which obviously then I was paying back in dollars. And that was my first money wobble, if you like. And then it sort of resulted, over the years, I had some really big financial woes and had built up this muscle of learning how to fix them, but seemingly was always in this cycle of paycheck to paycheck. And then if anything ever really big happened, I'd be in a bit of hot water. And so I was building up an awareness around that, and actually then started to make this really interesting link between my own family history and what was happening in my own life. And those two came together, and I was like, I've really got something different here. And when I started going out into the world of conferences and attending some of the big money conferences here in London, I was just hearing all this bravado about money, and all the stages were just full of men, and ultimately it was all the men selling all their financial products and everything. And I was like, the conversation around money just isn't right here. It feels really off. It's actually not getting into any of the emotional side of money at all. It's just really about money management and money 101. And of course, having a money toolkit and a way to manage your finances is really important. But that's only just a small piece of what you need to focus on when we think about money. It's so much deeper than that. And so it really started from there. I got really angry when I was at some of these conferences, just listening to, the bros just beating chests around it, really. And I remember leaving one conference and I'd sort of galvanated this group of women while I was there, just going, this is not right. We need to be having a different conversation about money. And actually, there were so many of us at the last conference I went, actually, where we were all just like, yeah, this absolutely needs to change. And that's when really I started getting into speaking about it a lot more. I then started going really deep into the psychology of money and really got to the root causes of why so many of us end up living paycheck to paycheck and sometimes really in those difficult circumstances. And it's not because always, we've got been mismanaging money. Often it's because we've got these deep rooted family histories, sometimes not very cyclical, that really impacts the way that we think and do and act around money. And I think there's a really interesting change of conversation that needs to happen there to awaken some awareness around it, honestly.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how different generations look at money as well. If we think about our parents or our grandparents being brought up in wartime and the whole scrimp and save and make do and mend and that kind of vibe, whereas now a lot of young people, are growing up where you buy something and it, you only use it a couple of times and you chuck it away and you buy a new one. And I think a lot of people are like, whoa, that's such a waste. But it's just how different generations look at money. And it's really fascinating. I think younger people can learn a lot from older people and how they were brought up. But I also think older people could learn a lot from younger people and how they manage money. It's really interesting looking at the difference just from a generational perspective.
Oh, absolutely. And I do go into that history in the book because that really does shape how we think about money, because some of that causes real life trauma. So if you think about the war as an example, it's real lack and scarcity, and the big drive was to save money. And that then filtered through probably into our parents and how we think about money. There's a lot of fear around and anxiety around spending too much money because it's really scarce and lack. And if you look at the millenniums, I think they've gone through a really tough time. Jobs changed very significantly. And we went from seeing people really in long-term roles, lifers often in corporate, and then they were seeing those job cycles shortened and volatility in the job market and a lot of uncertainty. And so we've gone from a generation that have been able to, of course, save, and many people getting on the housing ladder and climbing the ladder the very traditional way. And then that was all taken away from them. They had to recreate this, and still some are struggling to do what seemingly was very simple for the previous generation, getting on the housing ladder and saving the deposit and building that fund for the big dreams, whatever that might be. So I totally agree with you that it definitely shapes the cultural aspect of how we act around money, definitely.
Yeah. And how you're brought up by your parents as well, and what values they have. I know people whose parents brought them up by the importance of having to get on the property ladder and making sure you save enough money so you can buy a property as soon as possible. And that's what a lot of people have done because of almost pressure by their parents on that's what they're supposed to do and that's what they need to do. And others who are in their 40s and 50s and still aren't on the property ladder because of how life has turned out, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. You know what I mean? It's really interesting that as well.
Oh, totally. I think we are so societally conditioned, aren't we? Go to university, get a good degree, climb the corporate ladder, and then buy a house. Maybe not in that order, but that is the pattern. But particularly now, the world isn't working like that. People don't necessarily want to be fixed in just one location. They want to be a bit more nomadic and travel and see the world. And, I think we're getting braver in terms of taking families along to do that as well. It's been amazing to see that change. But I think that traditional sense of how we earn money is going to go through a big change. We're starting to see some of it. There is definitely some nervousness around the job market and what the longevity of roles look like. And I think now more than ever is a really good time to be taking stock of your finances and thinking about where you are, and maybe building some of the smaller, different ways of either investing money or thinking about different ways that you can build money. Even if you're in a corporate role, I think there are some great ways that you can do that whilst still having that core role and being able to earn money. It's just diversifying things a little bit. I think it gives you a bit more freedom in terms of, not worrying about the one thing that your income relies on.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot more normal to have multiple streams of income these days. Most people I know have multiple jobs or multiple businesses that are doing different things.
Yeah, and I'd love to see that. Honestly, I think that's just been such a joy because it just brings it home how much of a multifaceted type of, we're humans. We don't just want to do the one thing. And just because you have one brilliant skill set doesn't mean to say you necessarily want to do that whole thing for the rest of your life. So I think it's brilliant to see people doing different things and generating income in different ways and just adding more to it, because that's when it gets, exciting and you feel aligned when you're earning, as opposed to just pulling in the paycheck every month.
Yeah. Something you'll be very proud of me. Something I've done this month for the first time ever properly, because my friend was telling me that she and her husband have done it. And I said, right, let's do it, because we talk about doing it all the time. But this month we've actually done it. Written down every single bit of money that we have spent, whether it's on a bill that comes out automatically, whether it's, I'll just buy that on Amazon for $8.99, whether it's a cup of coffee, it doesn't matter how big or how small, it's all been documented, that me and my husband, and it's quite scary but really important to do, isn't it?
What was your big realization from doing that?
Well, I guess how much money we spend each month. And we haven't been particularly frivolous this month. So it's not like there has been lots of random purchases that we didn't need to do. We haven't been out for dinner loads. The realization that the understanding as to how we seem to get through quite a lot of money each month, basically. The bills add up. All these little bills add up, don't they?
I mean, the cost of living, I think, has increased exponentially, hasn't it, in the last 2 years? I don't think that's been a bit of a shocker. Just buying lunch in the city used to be a £5 and now it's a £10. It is a very different proposition, I think, now. But it's easy for money just to slip through, isn't it? So that awareness, I think, really helps in terms of managing your money and just looking at a lot of the sort of low level stuff that goes out. And some of it you probably didn't even realise you'd spent. Yeah. Subscriptions are a really good one that, I think, I can't even remember what it was. Uber One, that was it. I don't know if I'm allowed to call out a brand, but I think I'd inadvertently signed up for Uber One, which is the broader Uber taxi account. And, there you go. There's another $4.99 that was slipping through my account that I didn't even know I'd signed up for. It's so easy for that to happen. So taking that money audit every month, you can make it a fun thing as well. It doesn't have to be a miserable exercise. It can actually be quite nice. You get takeout, you sit down, have a glass of wine, go through finances. And I love that you're talking to your husband about it, your partner about it as well, because I think that then builds a good, healthy relationship around money as well. Just building.
Yeah, it's because it is a big reason why a lot of couples either split up or argue or have, things that they can't or mustn't talk about. Money can be a really difficult thing to talk about. And between your partner, particularly if you're living together and sharing finances to a certain extent, shouldn't be a taboo subject. Everything should be out on the table.
Oh, totally. That definitely goes back to family heritage, though, doesn't it? So for some people, money is quite openly talked about. And in some families, it's absolutely taboo. And it's really garish to talk about money. So people don't. It's sort of on lockdown. But I think it's healthy to sit down, go through your finances together. And of course, you're going to have big dreams and things that you want to do as a couple, as a family. You want to be able to plan to be able to do those things. And I think that's one of the big things that I love about More Money, More Life, is it's that realization that actually money is really a tool that you design for your life, not the other way around. Design your life first and then figure out how to actually build the income around it to support whatever those dreams are.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed in your book, one of the things you talk about, the fact that fewer than 9% of UK adults are receiving financial advice. Why do you think that is?
I think people are really scared of financial literacy, honestly. I think they're just very scared of it. We've not really been taught it in schools. Quite often we've grown up in families where it's just not talked about, or there's a lot of pain point around money. And, as you say, we argue about it, or there's trauma about it in the household. And I think that just builds a barrier to us actually getting our head out of the sand and figuring out how we're going to make money work for us and not the other way around. And it is that sort of ostrich syndrome, isn't it? You just duck your head down in the sand. We don't have to think about it, and therefore it's not happening. But actually, by doing that, we're not getting it any more effective in terms of managing our finances. And so just building the awareness around it. And it can start with a financial advisor, or it can start with plugging into some of the amazing resources that are out there. I think there's some really reputable people that are talking about money in a much more layman's way now, in a much more human way that is very relatable. I think sometimes we can get a bit too technical about money. And as soon as you start talking technical, people just go, okay, I don't understand it. This is not for me. I can't do it. But actually, there are some really simple ways of managing your money, really accessible ways of managing your money that we can all do that are easy to start.
I think the idea of a financial advisor, a lot of people might be put off because they assume, as I certainly did for a long time, that you need to have a certain amount of money and that they only want to deal with people who have got like this massive property portfolio, and you coming along, wondering if you can save a few €100 a month. They're just not going to be interested in talking to someone like you. And hopefully that doesn't always have to be the case, depending on who you speak to.
No, and that's really short-sighted, isn't it? Because at one point, once you've figured out the basics, and I think anybody can do that with the resources that are available online, particularly with AI, I think there are some really good sources of information out there, and you can do those basics yourself. And then once you've built up a bit of a muscle around saving regularly, automating your savings, that's really easy to do. Find those high yield savings accounts, not just the basic ones, but find the more longer term savings account that are going to yield you more interest on a monthly basis. Do the basics first, build up that emergency fund, and then start thinking about the bigger picture, which is investing. That's probably something once you start, you perhaps do want to have an initial conversation with a financial advisor. That doesn't cost you anything either, often, to have that initial conversation, and to start just building up a muscle around really simple investing strategies that literally any one of us can do. And in the long term, because of course, if you are talking about investing, I would definitely look at it as a long-term view, because the market obviously does fluctuate. But over the long term, it's a really worthwhile thing to do. And we see year on year people are doing very conservative investing, not risky things, really conservative investing, but actually making really good money out of doing it, just by using really simple investments. It doesn't really have to be overly complicated. But to be able to do that, I totally get it. There is some fear that comes up. You are at risk of losing money. And I think people immediately go, oh, therefore I can't do it. But always think about investing as a long-term passage into your money, making more money over time.
I'd love to have you on again. I feel like there's so much we can talk about on this subject, Sarah. Can we do that?
Yes, please. I'd love to. And particularly when we've got more feedback around the book, I think that will be when we see some really great stories of, money stories and awakening some of our beliefs around this. And we'll start to hear some of the stories around how this is changing. And that's really the story that we want to be focused on. Yeah,
great. Well, in the meantime, if listeners want to pick up a copy of More Money, More Life, it's available on our website, TRE.radio, and it's by Sarah Bennett-Nash, who we've been chatting with. Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been brilliant to talk to you today.